Why do I do this? Why do any of us do this to ourselves? I'm anxious, right now. I'm sitting in the dressing room of the SoHo Playhouse Theater in New York City, and I'm about to go on stage and perform a brand new show to a room full of living, breathing, three-dimensional people, something I have not done in ages for the same reason none of us have done much of anything with living, breathing, three-dimensional people. Though even if it weren't for this pandemic, even if I were performing every single day, I'd still be nervous right now, just as we all are when revealing something creative to be judged by our fellow human beings. Even though by all accounts, everyone's like, oh yeah, it seems to always go okay by any outside account, though by its very definition, an outside account does not take into account what is going on inside. What I can see in a room full of apparently pleased audience members is always at least one person staring at me, as if to let me know that they would consider it a great kindness if I just stopped talking. And it's very difficult to ignore that because we've all been conditioned over a lifetime of telling stories that if someone in the group to whom you are speaking does not enjoy what you are saying, you wrap it up, you cut to the end, you say, all right, well, anyway, so it all worked out, how goes you? But you can't when people have bought tickets and when those people are apparently, by all outside account, pleased with the proceedings. And so you just have to ignore the person who is mouthing the words, "You are killing me." You ignore their fist drawn up towards their chest. One fist upturned, one fist downturned. The downturned fist pretending to turn an invisible crank that is slowly raising the middle finger of the upturned fist until the bird has fully been flipped, their significant other next to them rubbing their back soothingly, telling them this too shall pass. He will stop speaking eventually because he is mortal and someday he will die. And I can't blame anyone for not enjoying what I do. Maybe this person's seen me before and they've forgotten that, they're out there in the audience being like, oh, not this guy again. Maybe it's not even happened once. Maybe it's happened so many times. Maybe it's happened like 20 times, of him being like, nah, him again. Oh, not, which he bears some responsibility for this, but he, of course, is thinking it's happened so many times. He's wondering now whether perhaps he's died and that this is what hell is, as we all know what hell it is to sit watching a show you do not like, surrounded by people having the time of their lives. Or more likely, he's never seen me before. He was dragged here by some friend of his. Ask that friend, well, what should I expect? Do I want to go? And the friend was like, I don't know, it's just a guy standing on stage. And he can't be faulted for thinking that meant I was a stand-up comedian. He was like, ooh, expecting probably I'm going to do a little material about the differences between men and women. A little bit of the old, you ever notice when, or what's the deal with her? Why is it that men are always like, I need to control the remote, and women are always like, I want the remote, and then the men are like, not gonna give you the remote, and then the women are screaming, and the man's like, I don't care, and she's on her back like an upturned beetle, and she's pulling the tablecloth down, and the Christmas candles on her face. She chipped her tooth, and paramedics are called. They have to strap her into the ambulance, bring her to a hospital where she's confined to her bed. Silver lining, though, she now has her own TV. And I wish I could do this material, but if I were able to do it, my career, if I can call it that, would be absent this anxiety that I feel now, because I would know I was about to go on stage and perform material that everybody can relate to, because everybody knows men and everybody knows women and everybody knows you can get a divorce. It's fine. You've tried couples counseling, and I'll be honest with you, nobody likes him. He's too into TV. It's no fun going to your house. So I figured I would just take this moment to tell you what I can't tell them out there, which is what this show is going to be, right? No, nothing about men, it's just going to be a series of true stories that I will be telling, stories that will lead to stories that will lead to other stories. And along the way, it'll occur to you at some point that, like, these don't really even seem like stories. These seem more like anecdotes, or not even anecdotes. They're more like musings, not even musings. They're more like half-baked ruminations on the question of why do I do this to myself? I could be at home right now watching Netflix and chilling. I'm just into season 3 of The Crown. The Queen has just shed one tear out of her left eye, and then the episode ended, and it's like a cliffhanger. I'm like, oh my God, is her right eye gonna get sad, or is this it? But instead, I'm going to be walking on stage, and there's going to be somebody staring at me, and they're inevitably wondering to themselves, is this going someplace? Is there a point? To which I would just like to say that, yes, there is a point. As to what that point is, I can't say for 2 reasons. One, I think, art should be something of a puzzle. This is why I don't have more success. But I think part of the fun of going to theater is that when you leave the theater or close the laptop, you can turn to your significant other and you can be like, so, did you get all that? And they can say, I don't know, did you get all that? And then you can use that conversation as a sort of springboard, a sort of excuse to talk, while underneath it all, of course, you're really trying to figure out whether you still love each other. And the second reason I can't tell you what the point is because, I don't think artists really should necessarily be able to know why or what their art means. And when I say artists, understand, I'm talking about all of us, right? Because we're human beings and we are creative. It is what separates us from the other animals on the planet, is that we are compelled and have the ability to tap into that river of energy that flows underneath this fragile illusion of reality that we are walking through. And we are all driven to be a mouthpiece for this aesthetic truth underneath us all, expressing it in all the myriad of ways that we do. And who knows why we're inspired to tell the stories we do, or make the art we make, or cook the meals with all the creativity we put into it, or dress in the fancy clothes that we think are original and make us look lovely. But we do it anyway, all of us tapping into that exact same energy. And so, me too, I'll leave this show and I'll look up at the universe and I'll be like, so did you get all that? And the universe will be like, I don't know, did you get all that? And then we'll use that conversation as an excuse to really figure out what's going on underneath the question of, do we even still like each other? And so, it's with this in mind, knowing that up ahead in this show, there will be a series of narrative right angles that I would beseech you to hold on to your hats, because we did not get dressed up for nothing. If you are dressed right now at all, I say this knowing full well that, of course, one of the few joys of watching theater during COVID is that not only can we now dress in the way we've always wanted to dress while watching theater, but we now, of course, can do whatever we've always wanted to do while watching theater, which for many of us is not watch theater, is have it on somewhere in the background, right? While you attend to a task that you've been putting off forever because it's so dull and repetitive and Sisyphean, but now Cleaning the bathroom is fine. You've turned it into a cultural moment if I'm prattling on in the background, and you can be on your knees, you can scrub around the floor, around the toilet, right? You can curse your male friends for their lack of marksmanship, but feel like it's okay. It's allowed this moment for me to feel culture and feel that I'm part of something louder, my voice, which is forever linked to the lemon scent of industrial strength cleaner, keeping the loneliness at bay. Or maybe it's not any of that. Maybe you are using the dulcet tones of my voice to aid you towards sleep. Perhaps I am cradling you in my arms as you lie in your bed, just listening to me as I'm lifting you over the threshold towards dreamland, whispering in your ears that the next time your friends use the commode, ask them to sit. Or maybe I'm tonight's entertainment. Maybe tonight is date night, even though you and your significant other know that after nine, I say, like a German in complete denial as to what is going on, 9 months in quarantine, just the two of you, you know that date night is different than any other night in name alone. Or perhaps this is first date night. Perhaps over the last several months, you've been flirting with someone over e-chat or you-chat or we all chat for I-chat. You have decided, finally, after several negative COVID-19 tests, after hiring your own teams of contact tracers to hunt down every single person that you have passed on the sidewalk over the last 7 weeks, to capture them, to slaughter them, to cut them open, search their flesh for signs of the virus, after quarantining yourselves for the past 14 days, encasing yourself in bubble wrap, a snorkel tube, the only indication that you are still alive within all that padding, the two of you have decided tonight to get together, and you've put me on in the background just in case, the two of you don't really have anything to talk about, but come on. You already have realized something you should have known before, is that tonight is not about talk. Not after all these months. You are realizing it's your hands that are in control, and they cannot keep themselves off of your new amorous partner who is feeling the same. The both of you working towards the realization of some long sexual fantasy. And if such is the case right now, I suppose my voice is working as some kind of oral aphrodisiac, to which end I suppose it would be good to me to pepper my speech with words appropriate to this grand occasion. Words such as yes, there you go, that's it, now you're doing it, no, a little to the left, that's it, yeah, there, no, that's it, yeah, now you got it, a little to the right, yes, by Jove, you found it. Or it's just as possible that my words are proving to be something of a distraction from this amorous moment, and if the device upon which I am speaking were not just out of reach, you would switch me off, but at the same time, I would caution against that, because who knows how your partner is receiving me right now. You don't want to disrupt a delicate moment. She might be finding this repartee something of a turn on, and if so, you should know that as she is making out with you, she's imagining she's doing so with me. And if you find that annoying, imagine how doubly so I find it, knowing that one day we shall meet, and I will thank you for, if not watching my show, at least having it on in the background, to which you will rightly be able to say, "Oh, the pleasure was all mine." Though however annoyed we might feel towards each other, we can agree certainly there was a moment of kinship, certainly that we felt earlier when I beseeched you to hold on to your hats because we did not get dressed up for nothing. Since after all, if you had not gotten dressed up, it would be impossible for you to oh so pleasurably now get undressed. If it can be said that this phrase is famous, then it could be said to have been made famous 700 years ago, when it was uttered by a member of a ragtag army of Scottish nationalists, just before they charged across a field to wage war against their better equipped, better trained, more numerous English adversaries on the other side. A battle which, against all odds, these Scots won. That phrase echoing in their minds, prodding them on further. And now that I have seen 2.25 seasons of The Crown, now that I have seen with my own eyes the Queen herself in over 3,000 different dresses, I can understand what fear it would have put into the hearts of those English to hear the Scots cry out before their charge, "We did not get dressed up for nothing!" We know this was said, of course, because this is what was said in 700 years after this moment in the movie depicting this exact battle, that movie being Braveheart, a movie that had a member of a ragtag group of not Scottish nationalists, but extras playing Scottish nationalists dressed in costumes meant to look like Scottish nationalists, just before they charged across a field, not to wage war against a different army of extras, but to wage war against the exact same army, because they actually used the exact same actors to play both armies. They just dressed them in different costumes. So we can imagine on that set, there's a lot of anxiety. All the extras trying to keep in mind which way they're supposed to be running, which side they're on at any given moment, all surrounded, of course, by an army of hair and makeup, and a director in Mel Gibson who would have been anxious, feeling that his reputation was at stake, this being back when Mel Gibson could not have been faulted for thinking that this would make his reputation. And so that when the member of this ragtag army of extras cried out, "We did not dress up for nothing," there was a smaller army of producers with calculators in hand who were able to put an exact dollar amount for how much they were spending to dress all these people up. And so it's with the pedigree of these two situations in which this perhaps famous phrase was said that we should consider the third time that this phrase was said. We should consider whether it really deserves to be in that lofty pantheon of situations in which this phrase was uttered, one being for freedom, the other being for the solvency of a major studio. The third time it said, to be clear, was really many times, but it was always said by the exact same person, to the exact same person, and always in the exact same situation. The person to whom it was said, me. The person doing the say, my buddy, Johnny P. And the situation in which it was said was always right before we were about to go on stage and perform our little two-man play called Inescapable, which we toured across the North American Fringe Festival circuit. And for those of you who don't know, Fringes are festivals of independently produced theater. Anybody who wants to tap into that river of inspiration can put on a show. And Johnny P said to me way back in 2014, he was like, you should write a play for the two of us to tour across the continent. And I was walking thereafter around the city of Bellingham, Washington, when the entire play just sort of downloaded itself into my brain. It was this great moment of connection. We've all experienced it, suddenly feeling that inspiration, feeling that the muse is perfectly speaking through you and representing that aesthetic truth of what it is to be alive and why it comes out in the ways it does and why we express it in the different mediums that we do. Who knows? But the muse decided to speak to me in the form of a play that happened to be about two middle-aged men. And is there any worse descriptor in the English language than middle-aged? It's so like, you know what I mean? No one knows what to say when you're young. People can compliment you and say, "Oh, you're so wise beyond your years." When you're old, people can compliment you and say, "Oh, you have such youthful vigor." And when you're middle-aged, people say nothing. They're like, "I don't know what to say." Just you feel like you just sort of shrink away. You're like, "It's okay. Don't mind me. I'll just be sort of over here." Everyone's just sort of waiting for you to get old so they can start giving you compliments again. You know, it's like in a world where we celebrate like hot tea and iced tea. The middle age is like room temperature tea. It's just dirty water by any other name. There's no mystery as to why it's the only age to which we append the word crisis. And these two middle-aged friends, they find this mysterious box in the closet at a holiday party. It's invisible to the audience, but they can see it, and they take it out, and it turns out that this box is a time machine, which every few minutes sends them back in time a few minutes with no memory that they've just played out this moment. And so they are doomed to repeat that moment, that conversation again and again and again ad infinitum. But to say the same conversation is not to say an identical conversation. Because though they are sent back with no memory, they are sent back with their physical bodies, with the hormones that were flowing through their veins, which is to say they are sent back with whatever emotion they were feeling, an emotion that expresses itself through ever-increasing anxiety, a sense they have that something is not right. It is an existential crisis without end. And if one were to ask me, what's all that about? You know what I mean? Like, I get the plot, but what really are you trying to say? I'd be like, well, I don't know. I mean, I have my theories, you know. I think at the time I would have said, well, it's, I hate to say this word, it's about middle age. I think it's about finding yourself in a situation in life and you wouldn't really decide to be there, and you maybe feel trapped in it, you know, and you're having a sense of your own mortality. But now, I think I would say that the play is about this moment right now. Which, I mean, this pandemic wasn't even a twinkle in my eye at the time, you know? But I mean, think about it. You got these two men who are being terrorized by something invisible, something which may not even be there. These two men who are stuck together in some kind of endless quarantine, repeating the same moments again and again, the same conversations and the words in different order, as are we all. A feeling that time has collapsed in on itself, that it no longer seems to have any sort of meaning, a sense that something is wrong, a feeling that you are in an existential crisis. That, of course, is also a very real crisis, but when you're not sick, when you don't actually go to the hospital, successful as I have not. It just exists, as I said, as an existential one, as a sort of a feeling, a problem, something you read about in the papers, but which you can't see any evidence of. And time, of course, time, right? Time. When you are an actor in a play, you have the sense that you are repeating this moment over and over again. And indeed, Johnny P. and I were repeating this moment over and over again, doing this play from festival to festival, each festival itself an ephemeral capsule of time, that once that festival is over and you go on to the next city, the next festival, like the last one didn't even exist. No one in the new city knows about the last one. No one knows if you were a success or a failure or what friends you had or anything. And then that next festival's over and you move on to the next one, sort of feeling you're repeating this moment, but it's switching up a little bit, and then eventually you make it back home. And of course, nobody at home has any idea what you've just been doing for the last several months. It's as if none of it really happened, but you can still feel it. And I'm not blaming my friends. Of course, I don't know what's been going on in their lives either. But every now and then, which is to say, once, not every, just one time, someone saw our play and said, I want you to take that play and bring it to my theater, the SoHo Playhouse in New York. And Johnny P. and I were like, we're going to New York! Which, to be honest, was somewhat, a little less exciting for me because I actually live in New York. But Johnny P., he lives all the way in Nova Scotia, which is so remote that the only way in or out is by machete. And we were sitting in the dressing room of the SoHo Playhouse, not this dressing room, 2 floors below us right now. We would be there right now if it weren't for certain ramifications having to do with COVID-19. And our stage manager, he came downstairs, he said, all right, 2 of you, it's time to do the show. And so we followed him up the stairs to the main theater, which is 1 floor below where I am sitting right now. And he left us alone there saying 2 minutes to go. And Johnny P. was at one end behind the backstage curtain, and I'm at the other end behind the end of the backstage curtain. And Johnny P., he turns to me and he says, well, we didn't get dressed up for nothing. Which, is demonstrably untrue because we're actually performing the show in our street clothes. So we actually didn't get dressed up at all, other than the dressing up we're obligated to do by society when we got out of bed. But I don't feel I want to take the time to explain this to Johnny P. right now because I'm experiencing a certain level of anxiety, knowing that there's a whole bunch of friends on the other side of that curtain, and who else might be, I don't know, reviewers, you know what I mean? Like, this is going to be our off-Broadway debut of our little play that could, and I'm suddenly wondering to myself, why do I think anyone should want to listen to a 45-minute fake conversation, aka the play, about an object that will never exist, leading to a situation that can never happen? And I'm wondering, why do I do this to myself? Why is anyone in the audience doing this to themselves? What are they here for? And I'm trying to cram all the words that I'm about to have to say, a confusing, repetitive script, into my frontal lobe, and through a little tiny hole in that curtain, I'm seeing that the stage lights are all going dark. And next to me, Johnny, all of a sudden, he whispers and he says, oh no, I forgot to write the words on my hands. To be clear, in the beginning of the play, Johnny reveals there's some words written on his hands, and we don't know what those words mean, but then again, they're referenced at the end of the play, when because of what happened before, they have extra meaning, and suddenly all is revealed to both the audience and to the characters. It's a great climactic moment, but I would have explained to Johnny P. that there is so much about which the audience is currently suspending their disbelief. They are looking at a stage upon which there is only one table and two chairs, and yet they are being asked to believe we are at a very fancy house at a very extravagant holiday party. We are asked to believe that indeed there is a time machine in the hand that we're carrying around. And if we tell them that there are words written on the hand, they will just believe it because we say it is so. But I do not have an opportunity to say any of this to Johnny P, because no sooner does he finish his whispered lament than he all of a sudden just runs away. Like into the darkness, just runs away, leaving me standing there being like, Johnny P! But I can't say anything more than that, because through that little hole, I can see the stage lights are now coming back up on not the off-Broadway debut of our play, but rather the off-Broadway debut of the table and a couple of chairs. And it's just silent up there, and I look at the hole, and I'm like, should I go on? And I think the word is vamp, but I don't know how to, vamp. I don't know. Do I just pretend I'm tidying up, which is nothing to do with the play. So I don't, and instead I just follow Johnny P's lead, and I just run away into the darkness, down the flight of stairs, now chasing Johnny P through the bowels of this very building, whispering, Johnny P! Come back here, Johnny P! What are you doing? There's a play upstairs that's not happening because we're not doing the play! Where'd you go, Johnny P? And I get down to the bottom, there's a hallway there, and then I turn the corner, and I up in the dressing room, and he turns around and says, I found a pen! I'm like, forget the pen! We gotta go! We turn around and run right on back up the stairs, run back up into the darkness, and then as we're getting towards the top, I can see through a little hole in the curtain that the stage lights have gone down again. Great, we burst through the curtains, we assume our positions on either side of the table as we're supposed to, and then the lights come up and we begin the play as we're supposed to in mid-conversation at a rapid pace. But it is difficult for me to keep my focus on the words because I am, to put it mildly, curious to know what the audience is thinking is going on, and could they hear me scream, whispering to Johnny on the other side of the curtain? And are we to them now the Keystone Cops of off-Broadway theater? And we're not just, I don't know, have you ever had this moment, okay? And where you really want to get into it with somebody, and you really want to tease apart their decision-making process, talk to them about their motivations and why they're making the decisions they're making, but you can't because first you have to have a fake 45-minute conversation in front of other people about an object that will never exist, leading to a situation that will never happen, which is a category into which I would have put this situation if it had not just happened. And of course, we're not just having one conversation, we're having the same conversation again and again. And as the anxiety levels are increasing, so are the characters getting angrier and angry at each other. And let me tell you, I am able to really channel some energy and frustration into that moment until finally the climactic point comes and Johnny P suddenly reveals his hands with the words on it, and what I see written there in my face is written in the handwriting that you would expect of a man running up a flight of stairs in the dark while another man is whispering at him. This is a series of just chicken scratch marks, not a single word on there. I don't even know what he could have imagined these sticks lines would have meant, and I have never delivered a line with more truth than the line as scripted I delivered in that moment, which was just, what is that? cuts. We finish the play, the audience applauds. We go backstage. Johnny P, he says to me, well, I think that went very well. And you know what, he's right. It did go very well, but it is possible to be both right and wrong about something at the exact same time. And so I just lay into him. I mean, very quickly, very briefly. I just have to say something, and I feel bad right away because then he feels bad right away. And so I very quickly followed up, and I'm like, hey, Johnny, look, no, it's okay. I just had to get it off my chest. It's fine. In fact, you know what? We gave them an experience they don't even know that they had, an experience unique to theater goers across the world. We presented them a moment of pure nothingness, to which they, as we all do, were creating a story out of what they perceived to be clues in the moment. They were having a relationship with this. They are even now walking home with their significant others and turning to them and saying, so did you get all that at the beginning? And then they're saying, I don't know, did you get all that? And they're like, this is why we love each other, because it's fun to talk about arts, right? And we gave them that moment, you know, and we should feel good about that. An audience in front of a no-show, right? You know, and come on, let's go back out. I say to Johnny B, let's go back out, and they're still applauding. We'll have our little curtain call out there, and we shouldn't worry that, you know, that like that's yeah. Oh. Thank you. This is okay. You know, it's crazy. It's crazy. What's crazy, this is weird, isn't it? For me, as much as I'm sure it is for you, here we are. We're all together in a room, and feels transgressive and awkward. What's crazy is that I was anxious about this moment. I'm not going to lie to you because I feel like it's obvious right now that I'm feeling a little awkward. And it's a way to kind of get over that anxiety. I just decided to be upfront about it with the people that are watching this via the streaming. And apparently I was so successful at getting over my anxiety that I literally forgot that I was going to be coming out and being in front of people. So thank you, and apologies. I've become so used to this, the interface, as I'm sure we all have, not just for performing, but for telephone and for communing with families and having Thanksgiving, you know, together over these devices. But it's amazing how quickly just have accepted it and become, like, these devices have become like my right hand, you know, like literally. And so I've been out in Montauk on the eastern tip of Long Island for the last nine, I say, like a German, in utmost denial of any of this. 9 months with just my wife and our now 2.5-year-old daughter. And when we went out there, we didn't imagine we would still be there now. And when we went out there, well, we don't know anybody in Montauk, so it's been a de facto quarantine. So we've been isolated by ourselves. So this
and the greater this, which is New York City, is a lot of people here. Not that you really necessarily see them in the way that I used to see them when before this all happened, because everyone is squirreled away in their homes. Are my legs okay? I'm not used to anyone being able to see from the waist on down, and I'm suddenly worried that like my beard is so large that it's going to make my head out of proportion to the rest of my body. You know what? That's on me. That's my problem. So you know what? Let's do some theater. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited you guys are here, even if it is a bit awkward. First, I should probably put this down. Close this. And I'll put it over here, and say this something before we get any further into it, because it's worth saying about doing theater in New York City right now, something I never imagined I would say, and guys, right now in New York. It sounds like a joke what I'm going to say, but it's actually serious, as much as I can't believe it. I am the only show in town. Which means you are the only audience for the only show in town. I am now the longest running show in New York City. I am the last one, and if you're wondering yourself, like, oh my God, what does that feel like to be the last one? I don't know how I feel about this. Maybe because I've been the last one so briefly and so recently that I probably can't speak with much authority. I could, though, echo the words of a friend of mine when I asked him what it was like to be the last one at, the thing that he did. And I'm going to tell you his response. But I'm also going to tell you that I don't necessarily know what his response meant. Because interesting fact about this friend, literally, I never understood a single word he ever said to me beyond the answer to this question of what it's like to be the last one. And his response was, well, all this is now mine. Which, the way he said it, I can only assume he was implying, and what of it? That without people to share it with, without people to compete against for it, what does it mean to be the last one, to be the longest running show in New York? What does it mean to be the only show in town? It's not much of a sense of accomplishment, really, is there, if you're just all alone. And I know that you probably think to yourself, well, tomorrow, there'll be another show. And then eventually all of New York City will get back up and running, and Broadway will be a thing, and off-Broadway, and off-Broadway. But if we look at a spectrum, of like theater in New York being fully back up and running, and there being no theater at all, like we're much closer to this end of the spectrum. All we really need to have happen right now for there to be no theater is to just have me stop talking, right? Every great city crumbles, right? And every great city has its great venues, its great amphitheaters and coliseums, and I'm sure none of these places knew that the last show would be the last show ever in that city. I've seen it myself. I've stood on a stage in a theater that was the size of a Broadway theater, that was as ornate as a Broadway theater. I've stood a center stage on a stage that itself was filled with holes that had been made from light fixtures that had just dropped off and fallen through the stage from rusting metal scaffolding up above. I've looked out at an ocean of seats inside of which no audience will ever again sit, all surrounded by ornate walls that are now peeling with such alacrity that it could be said that the peeling paint is itself peeling. This theater in the center of a city that was once home to 50,000 people who all got up and left in one moment, right? A city that suddenly emptied because people ran in fear from something invisible that suddenly worked its way into the atmosphere. Something which could kill you. Mostly didn't kill you. Mostly did something different to every single person, right? Something against which people wore masks, something against which people cleaned surfaces, something that lingered in the air, and if you breathed it in, it would change your insides. And I'm not talking about some ancient city. I am talking about a city that was built from scratch. In the 1970s, a city built out of the woods and the hills of a former Soviet republic so that the Soviets could show the West what kind of city they could build when they did so from scratch, right? So this city, all the shelves and all the stores were stocked with all the latest amenities. A city that by all accounts was beautiful. A city that was abandoned just 10 years after it was built over the course of just 3 hours. I'm talking about a city that was called Pripyat, but is now more commonly referred to as Chernobyl. And if I could just say one thing about Chernobyl, which is just it's sort of like my issue, okay? And I feel, but maybe you will recognize this in yourselves with slightly different details. And anyway, you know what? Let's do this. Can I ask all of you guys to come up on stage with me? I feel like we kind of got off on a rough stop when I came out here, and we've all been so separated from each other for so long. So yeah, come on up on stage. Everybody, if everybody can sit in that chair, I don't know how you do it, just pile all up on top of each other here, and let's just talk. Let's just have a conversation about loss. Like, has there ever been something that you felt was a part of you, deep in made up who you are, and then you lost it, not through death or something, but just because maybe everybody else took ownership of it. Like maybe you read comics when you were small. Maybe you were a big fan of Iron Man or the Avengers, and you didn't know anybody else who read comics. It was just sort of yours alone. Like your brother read them, but you never really talked about these plots, these epic tales of these superheroes who were fighting again and again to stave off the end of the world. And then at some point later, Marvel made these billion-dollar franchise movies, and suddenly the comics and the Avengers and Iron Man belong to everybody. And in fact, everybody knows about them more than you. And you're like, they're not yours at all. You've sort of lost them in that regard. Or maybe it was a fear that you used to have. Maybe you were at one point so terrified of nuclear annihilation, of the radiation fallout that would follow, of being the last one left alive. Maybe it was the last thing you remember ever crying about to your mother at an age when you were perhaps too old to still be crying to her, your mother, having to sit along the edge of the bed and search for the right words to console you about a thing for which there is no consolation. But apparently she found the right words to make you feel like, well, you can still go back to sleep even though the threat of nuclear war is still as imminent as it ever had been in the 1980s. But then some years after that, in 1986, on the other side of the world, a nuclear reactor melts down in Chernobyl, and it releases this malignant energy, this boogeyman, this specter into the air, and everybody runs away and abandons the city over the course of 3 hours. And it seems to you that this perhaps is a harbinger of things to come, that perhaps this is the fate of your beloved city, New York City, and it stokes the fires of your fear of apocalyptic stories. And so, of course, what does that mean? You devour stories of the apocalypse. You watch movies and you read more books about the end of the world until it occurs to you that maybe the only way to really kind of get past this is to go and confront this fear head on. And so you buy a plane ticket and you fly over to a country that you thought was called the Ukraine, but is just called Ukraine, to a capital city that you thought was called Kiev, but it's just called Kyiv,
where you then take several $100s of U.S. cash and pay it to a man in a parking lot outside of a Pizza Hut. And he immediately puts you in a van, and the two of you drive 2 hours north to a military checkpoint on the perimeter of this place called the Exclusion Zone, an area that radiates 30 kilometers out in every direction from the melted down nuclear reactor in the middle, an area which the government decides no one will ever live here again. This space is no longer under the dominion of humankind. It is outside our construct of time and space, and now is fully occupied and lived in by this mysterious energy that we call radiation. But what is radiation then? Just a mysterious energy. But perhaps because of these few $100s of American cash you paid your tour guide, you are gained access past the military checkpoint, past a second military checkpoint, until you find yourself in the exclusion zone, where you and your tour guide spend 2 days wandering around an abandoned city, down grand abandoned boulevards overgrown with trees, through abandoned hospital overcome with crushed vials and bathtubs filled with strange liquids, through an abandoned school littered with books, through an abandoned police station, into a restaurant, out of a cafe, through an abandoned amusement park, and then you, on your own, are allowed to wander up through a skyscraper. Not like the skyscrapers that we have here in New York, no, but 20 stories tall. It's still the tallest building in all of Pripyat, and you are left alone to make your way through this high rise of apartments, in and out of people's homes, people's spaces where they lived and loved and laughed and raised children, into living rooms, much like this living room right here. This space used to be the home of a woman who died just 5 years ago, and this space has now been turned into a theatrical space, and perhaps we are feeding off of that energy right now. Perhaps that is what is encouraging this stories that I am speaking to you at this very moment. The feeling that in this room itself, people lived lives, they traded stories, they had dinner parties right here. Dinner parties which, as all dinner parties do, always ended up in the kitchen, right? Drawn there, just as we're drawn there right now. Let's do this, right into the kitchen. And who knows why people always walk into the kitchen, People always do. And everybody, every time, at every party, they'll always wonder, why do we end up here when there's so much room out there? We're all cramped into the kitchen. But perhaps the reason is because this is where people put their creative energy into our sustenance. It's where we make the bread that we then later break together. This is the place where people feel confident to exchange confidences. It's the place where people gossip. And gossip has bad meaning and vibe to it, but really gossip is just our way of affirming to each other that we are all part of the same narrative, which makes this illusion we walk through feel more real. This is the place where we laugh together, where we share drinks, where we get drunk together, where we eat breakfast together. This very room, there was a woman living here and being on the phone and doing puzzles on this counter here, just as I was experiencing while walking through Chernobyl. And then if you had been there with me, we would have made our way up to the roof, right? And then we would have looked out over a city that's completely abandoned, where we would have wanted to yell out something to the citizenry, but we don't because we're self-conscious, because there's no one there to hear it. So it feels a little bit dumb to yell something out when there's no response, to be held back. And we regret that, don't we? That we didn't announce ourselves, didn't try to make a connection to whoever might have been in that city, even when we know that there was no one there. And we've brought that regret of that moment home with us. And then some years after that, HBO made a mini-series called Chernobyl, and everybody saw Chernobyl, and now everybody owns Chernobyl. It's part of everybody's personal experience, and because they know that I've been to Chernobyl, everyone's like, well, have you seen the series? And I'm like, no. They're like, you got to see it. I'm like, I've seen it. I haven't seen it. They're like, when are you going to see it? I'm like, I don't know. I'll see it. They're like, why did you see it now? I'm like, I don't have time. They're like, it's a pandemic. How don't you have time? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe time is an illusion, or maybe it's just because I've got a 2-year-old child, or maybe it's because I'm kind of afraid to see it, because I'm worried, like, what if the memory of seeing it overwrites my memory of being there, which no doubt I think would happen because it's a TV show. HBO does a very good job. There's great music, there's great costumes, there's editing, it's vivid, there are close-ups, there's credits, there's famous actors, there's beautiful people, there's drama, there's stories that wrap you up, instead of what I was wandering through in my own experience with Chernobyl, which was just the urge to speak, to tell the story of this place. But how do you tell a story about absence? How do you tell a story about not just the end, but the space after the end, when there is no one left to either hear or tell the story, when there's no one left anywhere at all, which is not entirely accurate, if I'm being honest with you. And why not be honest with you? I did meet one person who was living in the exclusion zone. And if I'm really being honest with you, it wasn't just one person. It was 2 people, a husband and a wife. But the wife never spoke. It was just the man. And it was on our second morning of being there. And my tour guide, he brought us there early in the morning. It was a bright, sunny day, the end of October, so it's cold. And this man, he brings me on a tour of the village that is just outside of Pripyat, but is in the exclusion zone. A village which this man always lived in his entire life, and then everybody was kicked out because of the nuclear meltdown, but he and his wife stuck back in 30 years ago, and now I've just been living here off the land. And he takes me alone. We leave the tour guide behind, and we go and we walk through and in and out of different people's houses in the village, all basically empty, but there's the odd personal artifact here and there, and he's telling me all kinds of stories about them, and it doesn't seem to bother him whatsoever that I don't speak a word of Ukrainian, nor does he speak a word of English. It doesn't matter. He recognizes in me someone who is hungry to hear another person's story, to feel that connection, just as I recognize in him someone who is desperate to tell the story of a place before he is no longer here to tell it, and with him will go all the memories of this entire village, and it won't be long. He's old. I don't know how old he is. He's the kind of old that, like, a person just seems to wear one outfit until the end. I don't know if this was him, but he had so many layers on that the amount of time it would take to just remove these layers is too much time. I imagine that he would forgot that they become like his skin, and that like every winter he puts on a new sweater that he forgets about until it gets to the next winter, and because he's a little bit older and a little bit colder, he puts on a new sweater that he then keeps on the whole he forgets about until the next winter. He's a little bit older and a little bit colder, and he puts on yet another sweater until eventually he will pass away. They will slice him open, and they will determine his years by counting the layers of sweaters. And I don't know the content of his stories, but I do recognize that these are funny stories because he keeps cracking up and laughing, and it's very infectious laughter, which makes me then begin to laugh as well. By all outside account, we are getting along like gangbusters, and I know by its very definition, an outside account does not take account of what's going on inside, but I can tell you from where I was looking, we were buddies, man. We were feeling a kinship. And he brings me on back to his house. And after he shows me his chickens, and after he shows me his big, fat, pink pig, and after he shows me the little plot of land upon which he is growing stalks of corn, and that his wife and him have been living off of 30 years, my tour guide says, before we go, if there's anything you want to ask him, I can translate. And I'm thinking like, oh my God, there is so much I want to ask him, but there's not time. And so I boil it down to the question and I say, what's it like being the last one? To which he raises his arms and says, well, all this is mine now. To which I say, I guess that makes you the mayor. And I don't think that line is like so funny. I just think it's like in the ballpark of amusing enough to just move us till the next moment. But apparently, when this is translated into Ukrainian, it becomes comedic dynamite because he just explodes into laughter to the extent where I'm thinking like, I should not worry about doing material about the differences between men and women. I should just focus on comedy about civil servants. And in all the stories that I have read, all the comics I have devoured, all the moments that my mother has had to console me over something for which there is no consolation, in none of these stories of the end was there ever a character who seemed to be greeting the end with such a sense of humor. More, I expected what his wife seemed to be projecting, wearing an expression that was never anything other than grim. And if I had had another question, I would like to believe I would have directed it towards the wife. I don't know if I would have, because nobody mentioned this thing, and that's what I wanted to ask about, and so maybe I would have demurred, but God, I really wanted to know, particularly in this apocalyptic sort of environment, I wanted to ask, what happened to your missing arm? And then my tour guide and I, we make our way back towards the city of Pripyat, following paths that we have to be very careful, walk along with great trepidation so we do not disturb the energy. Both of us with Geiger counters in hand, him knowing all the hot spots, telling me, put it against this tree and watch the meter go, against which I'll have a photo of myself and I'm like, oh my God, death, right? And we are being so careful, right, as we work our way towards the center, towards the room, the melted down nuclear reactor. And you know what? It's so like this movie called Stalker. Let me tell you, if you really want to learn about Chernobyl, I would say don't watch Chernobyl. Instead, watch Stalker, which, granted, came out 7 years before the accident in Chernobyl ever happened. But it so perfectly captures the mood, right? The director and the man who wrote the book upon which the movie is directed, they seem to have channeled that aesthetic truth and that energy that flows underneath us. It's energy that does not seem bound by time, that can reflect on events that have yet to happen, because this movie, Stalker, is about this former Soviet republic, and in the hills and in the woods, this energy, mysterious energy, nobody knows what it is, but it is made manifest, it is released. And so, of course, the army goes in to investigate. And it's not said exactly how, but the army is no more. So the rest of the army just cords off this whole area. And they don't call it the exclusion zone, they call it the zone. And it's decided nobody can ever go and live in there ever again. It is outside the dominion of human beings, outside our construct of space and time. It is now just the purview of this energy. But of course, as soon as you make something mysterious and forbidden, you attract the interest of people like me, which is to say, tourists. So the movie is about a tour guide who brings these two people into the zone. They don't have names, so they can be anybody. We just know their professions. One is a writer, so let's say that's me. The other is a professor, decidedly not me. And they spend the main 3 hours of the movie very meticulously and carefully working their way down different paths, trying to not disturb the energy within this zone, being both terrified and captivated by it the entire time as they work their way towards this room in the center. This room where it is said that if you gain entry, your desires will be made manifest. Spoiler alert, they never do disturb the energy. In fact, the energy may not even exist. 3 hours of them being careful of it, and they are successful. They make it to this room, and after a brief struggle that doesn't even really end, they just all sort of slump against the different walls and just sort of take it all in, the energy. And again, the movie does not try to make clear what this energy is, left up to our interpretation. And if I were to say what the movie is about, which is the fun of looking at art, at watching movies and TV shows and coming to theater like this, I would say, like, well, obviously that room is a place where there's this energy where we all are drawn to manifest our creations, to tap into that creative river that flows underneath us and try to give it voice, and of course aware that we are always failing to perfectly capture it in words, but nonetheless we continue to try and to commune with other human beings, always doing so. The room is the space where we feel that energy, where we feel alive. In the movie, it's all in color inside the zone. Outside the zone, it's all black and white and grim and despairing. The room, for me, is this room right here, right? It's this space that is a theatrical space that used to be someone's house, or it's the kitchen where everyone gets together and swaps stories and feels alive. It's whatever space that works for you, where you feel that you are either trying to communicate with someone else, you are trying to look for an audience, or you are going to be the audience, to sit in a space and try and tease out clues from a situation, feel an energy, feel a rapport, whether it's just you sitting in the beginning of a play upon which is nothing happening, or whether it's me in this exact same building in this moment right now performing to nobody. There's nobody here, right? It's just the idea that people are here. I'm just alone here with you right now, and I don't even know if you're on the other side of that lens, but I'm compelled to keep trying to connect with you anyway, as we are all doing all around this space right now in the great skyscrapers of New York City. Everybody in there, come on, let's go up, let's look right. We've got this twisting staircase right here, and you don't have a twisting staircase, a spiral staircase, unless you are going to go on up it, to go on up towards the roof, to try and look out over this great city called New York, right? And to try and look into different people's apartments and see them all there, quarantined in their spaces, on their devices, on their computers, looking at all the programs, looking at Netflix, looking at HBO, right? Looking perhaps at this show right now, right? Like right up here. Who knows? There might be someone watching the show. They don't realize I am right below you right now. I'm actually here in 3 dimensions, right? And there's all these people up there all feeling all by themselves right now, but they don't know that we are all alone in this together. I am here right now, just as you are there, just as we are all right here, and though we are separate, we will one day all be in a space together again, crammed into a kitchen at a dinner party. We will feel each other's presence. We will feel the love that we can only now express through these devices. And if I'm at all able to facilitate our ability to connect to that truth, that energy that underpins this illusion of reality and make us feel less alone, then this is why I do this, so that we might be able to do what human beings are driven to do, right? Which is to be together and try to reconcile the truth that only comes through community and through telling stories together. And if you are out there, I thank you so much for being there, for listening to me and my imperfect words that are attempting to wrap around something that I don't even fully understand myself, which I can feel. This brings us to the end of this moment, right now. But we will have more moments, right? Specifically, I am trying to do this, to create a brand new show about this moment right now, every 5 or 6 weeks. If you want to know about them, but please stick around. There'll be little credits at the end, and you can get on a mailing list. More than this, so I would just like to say thank you so much. Thank you really, truly so much. Again, I assume I'm speaking to people, right? And I know I'm speaking to people. And we're going to fade to black, but know that I'm still here. And the city is still here. And everybody is in their rooms right now, just as you are in yours, just as I'll be in mine later. Also logging on to whatever to try and see who's out there. If you enjoyed this show and you feel like you want to donate some more money, by all means, this is all I do right now. This is it. And there'll be a little credits at the end, and you'll see information out there on that. If you'd like to see any of the 3 previous iterations of this show, each completely different, they're up on YouTube. You can just Google my name, and then you can feel connected to that moment as well. Thank you so much to Brandon, and Charlie, and to Britt, who have all helped make this moment happen behind the scenes, and to the SoHo Playhouse as well for providing the space. Thank you so much, everybody, and I'm going to bow, and we'll go to darkness.